feeling spring. You know today's first day of spring? Just feel very springy outside? No. How many of you are from Missouri? If you're like used to the amazing Missouri weather. How many of you are from someplace nice like California? Yeah. Where are you from?
Like northern California.
Northern California? Where are you from?
San Diego.
Missouri sucks. Let's just put that out on the table.
2 more months.
Yeah. You back?
Yeah.
Do you graduate in May?
Yeah.
So you won't even have to come back to Missouri. Good
Uh,
for you. Don't come back.
I'll come back for like an alumni weekend with my kids when I'm like 40.
Right, yeah, there you go.
Other than
Yeah.
that, not happening. Sorry, guys.
And don't come in the winter. No.
No.
Pick the right time. You ever have one of those awkward situations, guys, where you know there's something, like you're in a situation, you notice something that's off, like something's awkward, and you can either point it out and call it out, like, okay, this is an obvious awkward thing, let's all draw attention to it, or you can ignore it. But if you ignore it, somebody might notice it, and they're like, that's really weird, why is that like that? So they formulate an opinion about that awkward thing that is off, that is incorrect, right? Have you been in that situation? It's like somebody's got food on their face, for example. You're in a big group and somebody's like eating and they got food on their face, like, do I point out the fact that they have food on their face and fix that, or we just kind of let it go, right? I have an awkward situation this morning. I don't know whether I should like state the obvious, like call attention to it, or if I just ignore it and maybe nobody will notice.
Let's hear it.
You want to hear it? All right, so this morning, I go to the gym, and I leave the gym, well, I go to the gym, work out, whatever, and I shower, and I get dressed, and I realize I don't have socks. So I don't have socks on. Now, nobody might notice that I don't have socks on. I'm not going to show you because you can't unsee it after you've seen it. So it's this awkward thing of, my student's going to notice I don't have socks on. They're going to be like, why doesn't he have socks on today? Right, I just call it out, now you know why I don't have socks on. So, appreciate that, Chris. I don't have socks on, but don't look. Because as I said, if you look, it's burned in your memory forever, and you can't unsee it. Anyway. Awkward story, awkward situation. Today, we're not going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the assignments. So, I thought maybe it would be good. We're going to have some discussion today. We're going to have opportunities for you guys. I have behavioral-based interview questions here. And later on in class, we're going to randomly ask questions and have you respond to behavioral-based interview questions in front of everybody. See how that works. But I thought I wanted to frame this a little bit better. Like, what is our objective? What's the ultimate goal with this? Hey, awesome. I'm just going to close the door. You made it just in time. So what do you think? Black, green, brown, or red? Black, green, brown, or what do you want to choose? Black? That's what I heard, so that's what I'm going with. Go with black. Okay, so there's two different paths we're on. When you think about transitioning from college to career, there's a virtual and there's a physical. Physical involves things like, hey, I'm in an interview. I have a resume. I'm having conversations with people. I'm networking. It's all the face-to-face stuff. Right? And then there's the virtual you, which is social media. It's whatever you have published that is on the web. Hey, if you guys have your computers open and you're taking notes and stuff, you know what, just close them. Actually, just close them, because that way I know you're engaged. Killing it, I know. But when you're in meetings, in the real world, people don't have their laptops out, unless you know for sure they're taking notes. So you have the virtual, which is social media. You have the virtual, which is anything you've produced and put on the web. So at Brian, I think I've seen articles written by you on the web. Like when I did a search, I'm like, oh, Brian's got some material out there. So you have any published work. Come on in. What's up? You got any published work? Or if you created like a website for yourself. So kind of an online brand. Not already all of these are part of that online brand, but we'll say specific. We'll call this a portfolio. So we have these two different tracks. We have A and B. And they work with each other. You can't just do this and ignore this virtual side, and you can't just do the virtual and ignore the physical. So our assignments, what I've been working at with the work, the assignments I've been giving you guys, is a connection between both of those things. So the resume, I hate resumes. I was in Arizona last week, and I was at a meeting with folks at the College of Business, Arizona State University. We were talking about resumes. Nobody likes resumes. Everybody kind of hates them because they don't get at what a person really is capable of doing. They're so limiting. But employers still, it's their go-to. But even employers don't really like them. If you talk to an employer about resumes, they're like, yeah, the resumes kind of suck, but we really don't have anything that is consistent that we can go to for deeper information about a person. So resumes, I call it the necessary evil. You have to have a resume. You can't get by without having a resume. And it's a physical thing. So I have you guys building a resume because you have to have it. We're talking about the design of the resume, the layout of the resume, and how the content looks. So that's important. We get into what we call, I've been calling not the online introduction, but the elevator pitch. Thank you. Elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch is somewhat physical because it's what you're going to do when you interact with somebody. If you have an interview, you're going to sit down and they're going to ask you the question, tell me a little bit about who you are, and that's where the elevator pitch comes in. Not verbatim, as we mentioned in a previous class, but you take the substance of what you've been thinking about and you use components of that in delivering that pitch. But it also, the elevator pitch ties into your online, O-N-L-I-N-E, online intro. So these are very similar to each other, okay? This, unfortunately, isn't conversational, so it has to be pretty scripted and pretty tight, and it has to do a very good job of communicating who you are to a target audience and showing them that you're capable. Awesome, come on in, welcome, no problem. Deducting 5 points. So the online intro has to be really well written, and it has to be attractive, it has to make somebody want to engage with it. It's like, oh, this person's interesting. Whereas with the elevator pitch, you've got a little bit of leeway, right? Because it's conversational, you can tweak it during the conversation. So that's why I'm having you do both of these. Now, with the elevator pitch, I think I mentioned this in a previous class, you can have a lot of content in that elevator pitch. If you work up an elevator pitch and it's long as like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, that's not the end of the world. You just don't want to deliver that elevator pitch in its full entirety when you're talking to somebody and they ask you, tell me a little bit about who you are. Okay, so that's those 2 assignments. Resume, on the 3 assignments. You got the resume, elevator pitch, and online intro. Online intro fits in virtual, and the elevator pitch really fits in the physical. Now there's other 3 assignments I have you working on, and that's kind of what you did, started, the week I was here, and the last week worked on with Cindy. How was last week, by the way? Was Cindy okay? Was she nice to you guys? I'll tell her, I'll take it back and say if you guys are mean to her, didn't like her, I'll let her know that you thought she was awful. No, she's pretty amazing. So you have 3 different works I'm having, I call them projects. 3 projects. One of those projects, well, before I even get into what one of the projects is, the idea of a project is for you to think about experiences in your life and be able to demonstrate skill sets around that experience. So we did the exercise in class, we kind of did some brainstorming, you had the assignment where, hey, brainstorm about experiences in your life, think about problems associated with that, and the solutions you used tied to those problems, and the skill set you used that are a component of those solutions. Because when you're in the interview and somebody asks you a question like, let's see, interview questions here, have you ever made a mistake? How did you handle it? Typical interview question. It's behavioral based, so you have to think about an experience that you've had. How am I going to respond to this question? And if you're sitting in that interview and you haven't thought prior to going into that interview about the experiences in your life, you're going to be like, what do I say? And so in that moment, you're trying to think of something, you might not think of something that's very good. Whereas if you thought about it in advance, you'll be ready for it. So that's why we think about the experiences, we think about the problems, solutions, and the skills associated with it. So what I want to do is have 3 particular projects. Our experiences, social, they're kind of like, technically I call them experiential narratives, but that's really a lot of syllables. So let's just call them stories. So you have 3 particular stories that I want you to focus on. One is communication based. So the idea is you think about your experiences in your life and you find one that really highlights your ability to communicate. Not only verbally, but it also includes your ability to listen, that's a part of communication, and written communication, your ability to write. So if you can think of experience that combines all of those, that is ideal. You might not be able to do that, you might have multiple experiences. Pick the best one. You're going to have a story that's tied to communication. Now the other 2 projects, project A and B, I'm not going to define what skill set I want you to showcase in those other 2 projects. I want you to think about your skill set, the job market that you're headed into, what you want to do in what kind of position you're looking for, and think about what skill set you want to showcase. So I don't want to limit you. I could have picked another 2, like problem solving and creative thinking or something, but I want to leave them open-ended. So you come up with the skill set you want to demonstrate as opposed to me defining it for you. So that's why in the assignment these are totally undefined. Okay? Now the reason we're doing these projects is, again, we have the virtual and we have the physical. If you take the time to think about your experiences, come up with the problems that you encountered in those experiences, think about the solutions tied to those experiences, you're going to be ready for the interview, which is physical, right? You're going to be able to answer those questions. But let's say, before the interview, you have an opportunity to showcase those skill sets. That's where the project component of, or as I said, we're using Foliotech, comes into play. Because you can tell those stories inside of Foliotech product to showcase your skill set, which is a virtual environment. So, 2 things at play here. Process, product. So there's a process you're going to go through as you think about these things that's going to benefit you in the physical environment. It also benefits you in the virtual. But ultimately, as you think about and you work through and go through the process of thinking about those experiences, figuring out the skills that are associated with them, and then building out this online brand we're gonna be working on, building out the projects, then it helps inside of the virtual. I think the process though is probably 70% of the work, and the product's about 30%. Like the greater the benefit, you're gonna get a greater benefit from the process than you are from the product itself. Okay. What questions do you have? None. Does that make sense then? Guess it's good that you don't have questions. That's a win. Okay. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the class, we're gonna have a little, I don't know, it's probably not fun, maybe it's fun, but I have interview questions. I'll just pass them around. Pass them around. I need one. What we're gonna do is, I ask for volunteers at first, and if volunteer system doesn't work out, then I'll just call on people. And I get to pick a question, and you get to respond to my question based on, these are all experiential based questions, behavioral based. So you'll have maybe 2 minutes to give me a response. And then, as a class, we get to coach and talk about your response and what changes you can make to make it more impactful. Maybe it's awesome, maybe we don't even make any changes to it, maybe it could be tweaked a little bit. One more thing before we get into this, just remember, last week did Cindy talk about this? Change markers, you gonna be okay with that? She talked about the STAR technique. I mentioned it in the assignment too. Do you have any questions about the STAR technique? That's the wrong way to ask that. As a teacher and you get into situations where you're asking questions of people, don't ask yes or no questions, ask open-ended. I should have said, what questions do you have about the STAR technique? What does S stand for? Is it T, A, R, results. So do you see that how this can be a story, right? The situation is your exposition. You're saying, hey, yeah, let me tell you, it was 4 years ago. I was just graduated from high school, working in this internship for this company. You're setting the stage. You're defining the situation. Task. They asked me to do X. This is what I did to complete it, and this is the results. So it is, you are delivering a narrative using this technique. Okay, cool. So no questions there? No. Awesome. Who wants to go first? I'm gonna sit down. Is that alright? Feels awkward standing up in front of you guys. It was weird. Kramen, you wanna go first? Would you just raise your hand as a volunteer?
Somebody gotta go, I'll go.
You're gonna do it. Alright.
Let's do this thing.
Okay. Let's do. Tell me about the first job you've ever had. What did you do to learn the ropes?
The first job that I ever had was at 13 years old. I worked as a construction day laborer for my coach's real estate company. And the benefits of the job really extended past just figuring out how to work on the construction site, which of course involves things like following carpenters and working with people hanging drywall and drums as day laborers. So along with that, I built through an organization called O School, which teaches young men in at-risk communities skills in order to work within the job force, and also just general people skills like knowing how to talk at a dinner table and be a person in society. I was in very interesting positions where my first job was at a young age, but it still allowed me to make a good amount of money while also developing my own personal skills for the future ahead.
That's good. Alright. So now, we're going to be a little bit critical here. A little bit critical. So what are some thoughts? What are some takeaways? Kramer just shared a story. I call you Kramer now. It's stuck in my head. It's like ingrained since I first saw your name right away. So tell me about the first job you've ever had. What did you do to learn the ropes? That was the question.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I think you did a good job answering it, but at the end you said like, and like I gained skills. I would be more specific about like what skills it was that you gained.
That was some good insight. Yeah. Yeah. You did mention some of the people skills, that organization that you were involved in that helped you develop, just, you said how to be human or something like that, right? So you could refine that language a little bit with some of those how to be human words.
Right.
Social interaction, importance of civil responsibility, how to communicate, how to have dinner meetings with people, right?
There we go.
Any other thoughts for Kramer? I would have said, so the second part of that question was, what did you do to learn the ropes?
Yeah, I didn't answer.
You didn't answer that. So that'll have an interview. You'll get 2-part questions, and you have to remember to try to hit both parts of the question. Sometimes you get lost in that first part, you forget, but it's okay to say, hey, I know there was a second part of that question, I want to make sure I answer that. Could you read that to me again? All right, who's next? Heads down. He's afraid. Come on. Just want me to pick randomly? Is that what you want? Okay, all right. I'll just pick. I know everybody's name. This is awkward for me. So if I point at you, forgive me because I don't remember your name, and then just tell me your name, and then I'll try harder to remember it. Okay. Brian, I know your name, just because you came and saw me a couple weeks ago at Offsite. So.
That is my name.
Yes. All right, your question. Describe a time when you saw a problem and took the initiative to correct it rather than waiting for someone else to do it.
I feel like I can relate to what you're saying about like, not being prepared. I feel like I don't have it.
Right, yeah, I know. I mean, you're on the spot and you got 15 other people in the room, so this is way harder to some degree than what it's going to be in an interview. But if you have 3 or 4 people in that interview, it's that same. The reason I wanted to do this is you experience the stress that happens that you're going to face, and trying to come up with something on the fly. It ain't easy. It's really hard.
Oh, what about like if I notice like the trash in my apartment's like piling up rather than just like waiting for my roommate to do it, I just like took the initiative and like did it myself.
That's a super small thing, but what does that tell me about Brian? What did you just learn there? Responsibility, right? What else did you learn?
I mean, that's a situation with no consequences, we still take initiative, it's not like a class or job, where like, if you don't take initiative, you get in trouble.
Right, totally, absolutely. What else do we learn? I mean, it's super simple answer. What else do we learn about Brian? He's clean. He cares, right? So those are small nuances you pick up in an interview that are very important, because you learn that about a person. Who the person is, I've said this since the beginning of class, who you are matters more than what you do. So when I'm in that interview and I'm asking people questions, I'm trying to learn, does this person care about what they look like? Do they care about, they give attention to cleanliness, and are they organized and structured, and are they personable? All of those things fit into every single question that you ask. All right, who's up next? Everybody's stressed out, they're like, holy cow. Okay, going over here. I know your name, Chris, but I'm not gonna pick on you. I don't remember your name. Let me see if I can, no, I'm not even gonna wait your guess. What is it?
My name's Katie.
Oh, not
Look at
Katie,
me and her.
not Katie.
Oh, Abby.
Abby, alright. I'm not gonna forget this anymore. Alright, Abby, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you been in a situation where you didn't have enough work to do? And what did you do?
I'm usually busy a lot. I guess, okay, so I have a planner, and so even if I don't have stuff to do, I work ahead, so I always have stuff to do.
Yeah, so
I always
that,
work ahead.
right, so you never wanted to say no. That would be terrible in an interview, it'd be like, have you ever been in this situation? No. The interviewer is in like, I have learned absolutely nothing about you, other than the fact you really did want to answer that question. So for you to, you kind of twisted it a little bit there, to say the reason, you can say, no, I've never been in that situation before, but here's the reason why.
Yeah.
Because when I find myself, because that's what they're looking for, that kind of question, is they're trying to dig into, are you lazy? So if you're in a job and, wow, I don't have anything to do this afternoon, are you just gonna sit at your desk and watch YouTube videos? Or are you gonna dig in and figure out what else you can do that's productive? Abby, good job, Abby. All right, Kate. It's Kate, right?
Katie.
Katie. Kate's fine. Is it Catherine? Is that your full name?
No, it's just Katie.
Katie. All right, Katie, you're up.
Yeah.
Give an example of how you've worked on a team.
Well, I'm in my capstone right now, so we've been working as a team for the last year. I'm the account executive, so I kind of run the account team as well as the creative team. It's been an interesting process, kind of managing two totally separate teams that also have to like work together for a common goal. So I'm like kind of the liaison between the two processes, so I kind of had to understand what both teams need and work to make sure that I can like bring them together.
All right, feedback for Kate.
Very open-ended question.
Yeah, I know. Feedback. Nobody wants to give feedback because they're like, oh, what if it's my turn and I give feedback? But it's okay. It's safe. This is a safe place. Safe
Yes.
place.
You could say more in detail like what you did to manage those like creative and that team, like in more detail.
Talk about something more like a story and relatable, maybe you could say like who your client is, or like about the people in your group.
That's why these experiences, thinking ahead about your experiences really matters, because you didn't approach Star when you gave me that information. You didn't really, you kind of describe the situation, but you didn't talk about the tasks and your situation working on that team. You could have framed it better, and that would have been more engaging for me.
Yeah.
That it were you kind of like, I don't know, I was a little bored with her response. Sorry, Katie. Don't take any offense, but I was a little bored, right? It was a little boring. And so, yeah, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, whatever. What if you have an interview at 9 o'clock in the morning? What are you gonna do,
I
right?
would've been up way more.
Get up way early, be prepared. So I would say, think about how you can frame these so that they're interesting, okay? Because you want the recruiter or the hiring manager wanting more. Oh, that's really fascinating. Tell me more. All right, going in this row. And it's Jenna, right? Jenna, you're up next. Okay. Okay, tell me about a time. This should be a question everybody in this room can answer, but I could be wrong too. Don't you hate it when you're playing Trivial Pursuit and somebody reads the question, they're like, "Oh, this is easy," or whatever. And you're like, "You think it's easy doesn't mean I think it's easy. It's not fair." Tell me about a time when you had to rely on written communication to get your ideas across to your team.
So at my internship last summer, I was at an advertising agency, and I was chosen to lead the
it's called Miracle Treat Day for Dairy Queen, and I was chosen to lead the community management for that day. And in order to lead the team and kind of educate them on how to even community manage for this account, it was with Dairy Queen. I relied on written communication with creating a deck and presenting it to them and sharing it with them to also collaborate on different ideas that they would have, but also inform them on the voice that Dairy Queen has and the goals that we have for the event.
Okay.
I think that's what written communication is.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good, yeah. You could have taken that a number of different angles, it could be emails, you know,
Yeah.
whatever written form, you could have said, well, I was in charge of a social media campaign and I had to convince an audience to do X, and this is
Yeah.
how I use written communication for that, so, very open-ended.
Cool.
So, what do you think? Alright, let me frame it, get a little more concise, what did you like about her response?
You're really specific about the problem and the solution that you made from it. I think that's really important when you're answering questions.
Yeah, you were specific, it was good. I like that you framed the beginning of it. You gave me a situation, and I could, in my mind, I almost visualized like, oh, you were at an internship last summer, so you painted a picture for me. In a story, that's the exposition, right? You set it up, like, this is what happened last summer, and you took me there a little bit. So that's good. What do you think she could have improved on?
This is just nitpicky, but obviously when you like prepare for it, it'll be different. But you mentioned your client was Dairy Queen twice. So just like sort of consolidating the main points of the communication, and then maybe getting more into like what was on the deck and what you had to communicate about the event. But other than that, it was good.
Yeah, it was good. I'm starting to get a feel for how important it is to think about these things in advance before you're actually there. All right, Erica, you're next.
So you figured. Alright, hit me.
All right. Question 14. Do you listen? Give an example of when you did or when you didn't listen.
Is this an ambiguous question? So like, do you listen? Yes, like I have hearing abilities, but if this were asked to be in an actual interview, like, I'm confused.
Okay, so I'm glad you're dissecting the question, and that's good. What do you think they want to learn from you by asking this question?
If I'm attentive.
Exactly. So give an example of a situation where you had to be attentive, maybe even when you didn't want to be, but you were, and because of that, X happened. Like, here's a situation, I was attentive, here was the results of my attentiveness.
Okay. So to answer the question, if I listen, yes, if maybe to a fault. I pay a lot of attention to detail, and sometimes it can be great, and sometimes it can go a little bit overboard, but at least I listen enough to get the nitty-gritty details of everything, because I like to be very aware. An example of when I did a good job of listening would be in my internship in New York City last semester, or last spring. I was working at a casting agency, and we had a really big shoot for Gap. We had an e-commerce shoot campaign for Gap, and I had to be in charge of basically managing hundreds of models that were coming through the door, taking down all of their information, but figuring out if off of like our first face-to-face communication, if they would be good enough for the campaign. Because when you're casting, it's really, really important to keep the brand goals in mind, but also the personality of the brand that we're shooting for. So Although someone may look beautiful on the outside, their personality is communicated through the camera more than you may think. So it's really important to keep the consistency between what the campaign is and who we cast in the advertisement.
What do you guys like about Erica's response?
That's a really cool job.
That's a cool job.
I don't know if that made sense, but like, I was trying to get at that I have to listen, I literally had to listen and like, essentially, not train.
I got it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I understood. Yeah.
I like how like specific and like very detailed, like your responses, like you said exactly like what you had to do, and you didn't just say like, I listened and did a good job. Like you kind of said like I listened and then I had to do X, Y, Z.
So what makes a story interesting is the small details you throw in. Now you don't want to be uber detailed, because that takes a lot of time. But just dropping a name, dropping, the setting, just a little bit more. Like I remember doing this. It was a cold day. When you use language like that people can directly relate to. They have an emotional tie with your story. And so being specific was really good. I appreciated that. And that was a really good example of listening. You came with that on the fly, right?
Yeah, I tried.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Okay. 13 minutes left. Everybody's like, please don't get to me. Kate? It's Kate, right?
Yeah.
You're up next. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Give me an example of a time when you were able to be creative with your work. What was exciting or difficult about it?
Well, I'm a designer for like 3 of my classes right now, so I have a lot of creative responsibility, but I think the one that I get to be most creative with is for my client, Custom Complete Automotive. That's for my capstone. And although I have like brand standards, like color palette and stuff, I get to be creative with like the divider pages and infographics and illustrations that I get to incorporate throughout the book and kind of keep consistent but differentiate. And so that's exciting to me because at the end when I get to show the client and I get to show my team members and instructor, just kind of the reactions they get, and hopefully they're good reactions, but it's just cool to showcase your work and show it in a different way than just graphs and stuff. So yeah, I think that's exciting.
Okay. What did you guys like about Kate's response? That was good. Looking for the positive here, then we'll go to the negative.
She talked about one specific client, but like slid in that she was a designer for 3 clients at the same time,
Yeah,
which shows that you like can take on a lot of work.
that was good. Not the hard part. What didn't you like about Kate's response?
And you could have said what you do in your other classes too, just a little more detail.
I also didn't hear what was difficult about that particular creative work. Right?
That says or difficult, so
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
chose exciting.
Gotcha. All right.
I did hear you say that.
I think if you're gonna lean on that experience a little bit, which is good because you're a designer, what's really important when you're a designer is being able to take negative criticism on your designs, right? Because inevitably, if you design something, somebody's not gonna like it, and that person's not a designer, and they're gonna, I don't like that. Like, well, okay. And you might not even be able to describe for you why they don't like it. They're just gonna tell you their emotional response. And so if you can describe, just for you specifically, because you are a designer, use that in an interview, be able to talk about how you can receive negative criticism and what you do with that, how you maybe that charges you and that's good for you and you can make changes and it doesn't affect you at all, that's gonna be positive for you in the future. Just your unique circumstances. Sounds good. Okay. It's, is it Nicole? Yes. All right, Nicole, you're up next. What do you do when your schedule is interrupted? And give me an example of how you handle it.
So, I am definitely a planner keeper. So I have my week, I try to get my week all planned out beforehand and everything written down. So I know exactly where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing each day. So when something does come up that I'm not expecting, like I had to have a meeting with my capstone this week, for example, that I wasn't expecting tonight, which kind of is going to interfere with some studying that I have to do for an exam tomorrow. But because I know that I have that, I am able to shift my schedule a little bit, so I have time now that I'm going to be slipping in that capstone meeting and then talking with this group to see if I can leave a little bit earlier, so I still have enough time allotted to study for this exam and feel confident going into it tomorrow. So.
That's good. All right. Thoughts? What's your response? Was it an exciting story? It wasn't super exciting. No. Did it answer the question? Yeah, it did. Not all of your responses you're gonna have an opportunity to really showcase like you're telling a story and really like wowing somebody. So it's not always you're not always gonna have that opportunity. But I think you did well with your response. It was clearly delivered. It was just kind of it wasn't super engaging, but that's okay. Not all of them have to be super, or will you have the opportunity to make them super engaging. Your name. It's not Abby. It is? I mean, I just said it was Abby, right? Yeah. There are two Abbies. Abby and Abby. Okay, Abby. Have we done this one yet? Tell me about a time when you failed. How'd you deal with the situation?
So I interned with New Friends New Life in Dallas, and it's a nonprofit that deals with survivors of sex trafficking and advocacy to prevent that. And so my projects that summer were really vague. It was just kind of work with these high school age boys and figure out how to reach them better and start these conversations of respecting women and stuff like that. So I went to these focus groups and surveys and stuff and found that social media was a great avenue to target them and created a social media platform to reach them. But where I failed was my manager was not technology savvy. And so I created a social media plan for Twitter with these pre-planned tweets and everything. But when I left that summer, he wasn't able to carry out this Twitter plan. I had done a lot of the targeting towards the high schoolers and not making sure that it was able to get laid out once I left with the person that would be continuing that project. So on paper it looked really great, and then at Twitter sitting there with no tweets because I wasn't able to pass on that information to my manager.
Okay. What do you guys like about that?
I like this example because it's really putting a story in it. But I think maybe you can talk about if next time you run into the same situation, what will you do? Because I mean, this one is it's gone, like it's unsavable. You no longer work for the manager. But if you have another encounter with someone who's not tech savvy, maybe you can switch your method a little bit.
Yeah, it was a good story. So I had a nice setting. I was actually interested in the work you did. I was like, oh, very specific. This is fascinating. Really laid out the problem that you faced, which was interesting because your problem was even the manager was the problem because he didn't have the technical experience that you thought that they did. But it's Maishi, right? How do I pronounce your name? Max, that's what you go back. Max is simple, okay. So Max's feedback was really good because by her saying, if I would have had, I would have done this differently. This is how I would have changed it moving into the future. That would have been really powerful. but it was I was engaged. I was interested. You were talking, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, instead of me going, what? Oh. You know, you gotta think about that too. Recruiters, hiring managers, they might have 15 of these in a day, and you need to stand out, you know? So your stories have to be interesting, have to be engaging. And I know it's 9:45 in the morning, so you guys don't have the vigor that you would have in the interview, but set the playing field here a little bit, give me an idea. All right, we'll do one more. Brad, in the back, he's hiding.
It's not Brad.
It's not Brad?
No.
It's Derek.
Yeah, it is.
Derek. Brad's over there.
I'm over here.
Yeah. Derek.
All right.
All right, Derek. Have you ever gone above and beyond the call of duty? If so, how?
Last summer, at my internship, we had a big meeting coming up, and I had to get a bunch of papers. It was like a couple hundred papers printed off, and the printer wasn't working, and I had to get them in like 20 minutes. So I drove to a local printing shop and got them printed off and paid for it with my own money with no guarantee of reimbursement to get to the get all the papers to the meeting in time.
Okay. Short and succinct. Thoughts for Derek?
I would like emphasize like the STAR method, like what the result was. So like if like they were so happy with you, that they like gave you a raise. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
So like it showed that like going above and beyond really made the difference.
Now the question I have as a recruiter that I can hit with is like, well, why didn't you have this done in advance? Why weren't you, why were you stuck in a situation where you had to do this in 20 minutes? So you want to be clear that that wasn't your fault,
Yes.
that was somebody else's,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise I'm stuck with, that was a good example of you telling me how you handled that situation, but how did you end up in that situation to begin with? Which could have been your own fault. And so I'm wondering. All of what is unsaid is just as important as what is said, right? Okay. So that was it. That kind of give you guys a feel for this experience a little bit. All right. So your homework, your assignments, whatever you call it, homework. You have those 3 projects. The resume was due today. The elevator pitch was also due today. If you didn't get those in, I'll give you a little bit of leeway. I wasn't here in class last week, so I understand that. So just get them as soon as you can. The drafts on the projects, I'm just going to look at for are they complete and incomplete. They're only worth 10 points. I just want you to have done something. Next week's spring break. So you guys don't have class next week. Just let you know, don't show up. The following week, the second version of these 3 projects is due. We'll also do it in Canvas, okay? Think about the STAR technique. So situation, task, action, results. So kind of break up your project, your story, that experiential narrative in that STAR format. Because for the final, we're going to move it into Foliotech. We're actually going to build the project inside of the Foliotech platform. It's communist look.
I know I did mine in Foliotech already.
That's fine.
I'll go
If-
back and.
Yeah, submit it in
I'm
Canvas.
so confused.
Yeah, it's a little. I thought I removed those projects from Foliotech, so you
You
couldn't
did
see
from
them.
mine. I
Yeah,
used to be able to see it when I
Now they're
tried to
gone.
submit, I couldn't figure it out.
yeah. I
I
think
couldn't submit on Canvas. Mine didn't have a button.
there was no in Canvas you couldn't upload.
Because that's why I went to Foliotech.
Mine used to not have a button on
So-
Canvas.
Okay, I'll go back
So
to
who was
Canvas.
able to submit in Canvas the drafts? All right, so you should be able to submit them in Canvas.
Okay.
And if you can't, just send me one of those, email.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
One of those things, those technology things. All right, you guys are free to go. Enjoy spring break. Does anybody do anything fun?
Yeah.
Look,
Where you going?